Had this not worked, I would look like a total mug. And I would be okay with that. It would be like, Finn, that was a dumb thing to pursue. I pitched my LPs on this in November last year, and then 2 weeks later, Google had their Willow announcement. And now everyone is like, whoa, quantum's a thing. Finn, how did you know? This is fortunate. I did know something, but the timing of how all this has played out makes me look more clairvoyant than I actually am.
Finn, welcome to the Slice Pod, where we uncover the stories of fresh emerging managers across the early stage venture landscape. You are the founder and general partner of Nebular Ventures, a $29 million fund investing $500K to $1.5 million in pre-seed, mainly vertical AI application right now. Let's begin where we always do around here by asking, was this always the plan? Did you always think you were going to start your own fund?
No, I definitely didn't think I was going to start my own fund. I grew up in Ireland, went to college there, started a company there. We were hired by another Irish startup, and 12 months in didn't really work out. At that point, I was going to move to the US, and my friends had a mini intervention with me where they were like, maybe you should go and work for someone for a little while and experience normal life. And I was opposed to that, but I figured, okay, I sent out a couple of applications for different jobs. And one of those applications was for an analyst role at a VC based in Dublin called Frontline Ventures. I honestly have never thought about VC at all. I met some VCs when I was running my company, but it was just kind of a different world to me. And so it was only once I got into the job that I was like, oh, you get to spend all day, every day searching for interesting people, working on interesting things. And if you're lucky enough to decide that you want to work with them and they decide they want to work with you, you get to spend a whole bunch of time figuring out all the chaotic shit that's involved with doing early stage startups without like actually being in the startup. I really liked the job. So I stayed there for 4.5 years, became a partner. Even when I left, I knew a couple of different principals. I'd been based in Europe during the pandemic. And then after the US opened up, I moved to New York and moved in with two of my friends who both founded software companies. That kicked off the more entrepreneurial thing. What are you doing? Why don't you go and do your own thing? That kicked me off a series of questions of being like, if I were to do my own fund, do I have the right experience? Should I learn from someone else for a while? This is a counterintuitive conclusion. I'm sure a lot of LPs would agree that, why does the world need another small solo GP venture fund? It's a good question. I ask myself it quite a lot. And even when I started my first fund, I don't think I had great answers to that. I made the choice to set up my own firm. But I found venture through my own interests as opposed to trying to backfit interests to the job. I used to make this analogy of when you meet people who are mega into sports, they can list like all the substitute players of like Italian Liga 2, like Lazio players, and you're like, what the heck, how do you have this knowledge? I think to be great in VC, you have to be so interested and have that level of passion for the technologies you're investing in, the companies you're investing in, for like people and players across the ecosystem. And I think I was like fortunate, and that was what I was interested in the companies, I was interested in the technologies, and understand how the whole ecosystem works. That was the sort of journey to figuring out like, what should I be doing? What should Nebular be?
What was the real catalyst for launching Nebular? Was it conviction? Was it frustration? Was it opportunity? All of the above, something else entirely?
I decided to start summer 2022, which was when the hot air was all flowing out of the venture market. I started fundraising in October 22, which was literally the bottom of the NASDAQ. I wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, this is the best time to invest ever when the markets are crashing. People in private equity are just so ridiculous. It's always the heads I win, tails I win scenario. The market is booming, it's great for me. The market is tanking, it's great for me. I think my reason to start Nebular was more a series of observations on the venture markets and why I thought what I was doing was going to be different. One of the things I observed in venture was, even in my period of time from 2018 through till 22, the average participant in venture has gotten more risk averse over time. The reason for that is as it becomes more part of the culture, as it becomes more high status, more people who previously would have been like, oh, actually, I'd rather go work at McKinsey, or like, oh, actually, I'd go work at Goldman, or like, oh, actually, that looks sexy, I'd like to do that. Like venture in its purest form is about taking risk. And I think that trend of the average participant being more risk averse was always going to accelerate. That was sort of step one, is like, I have a super high risk tolerance. If I wasn't doing this, I would just start another company. If I lost all my money, I would just move back in with my parents and their Labradors, and I would figure out what I'm going to do next. And then I think the flip side of the why start a fund was the average participant in venture is further and further away from the founder journey. They're further and further away from like being the owner and being the ultimate decision maker. Is it possible to compete with the Sequoias, Andreessens, Lightspeeds, GCs? Like, on a lot of dimensions, absolutely not. Like, you can't compete with them on brands. You cannot compete with them on value add services. You can't compete on like them with the ability to open doors for founders. But where you can't compete with them on is conviction, belief, like one-to-one relationship between you and the founders. It was those two trends that I observed were moving forward in a certain direction. The through line on that is I'm willing to go out and do the work, meet the founders, and dig into areas where I think are interesting. It becomes more consensus to necessarily invest when you're at a bigger firm. That's not because I'm a frontier tech person or a deep tech person. I just think the edge I have is today I can be a robotics person, and tomorrow I can be a healthcare back office person, and the day after that I can be an AI teddy bear person. And nobody can be like, Finn, what are you doing? Why are you covering all these different areas? I can be like, I'm whatever great founders are working on that I understand. And like, I draw that line in like, I'm not a biotech guy. Like, I don't get, like, I'm not well set up to assess certain types of business models. And so, but within the universe of stuff that I feel confident around and understand, I feel that that's the edge and that's how you play against people. And because I'm actually interested in the technology, people will be like, do you want to talk to us for an investment? I'm like, no, I'm here to learn. I can go fuck around in quantum and not make an investment for 6 months and it doesn't matter. And like, I did that and I couldn't find anyone. So I just decided to start a company in quantum. That was what I thought was the best outcome. The way you win in a competitive environment is doing things that others can't. If I was a partner at another fund who said, I'm going to tip around in quantum and Bitcoin for the next 6 months, people would be like, what are you talking about? And then if I came back and was like, hey, there's no companies, but I'm actually going to split my time between founding a business and doing this, they'd be like, what are you talking about? So that to me is like where this idea of nebular and like this idea of like compete in places where others can't and do things strategically that others can't. I don't think you should do anything if you don't think you have a chance at being the best in the world at it. I just think it's still a waste of time. Growing up, my mom had this thing of like, I don't care what you do. If you want to play marbles, play marbles. But if you don't play marbles, be the best marbles player in the entire world. And I think it's the same in venture. I wouldn't just do it because I thought it was an interesting way to make money. Like, there's lots of interesting ways to make money. I'd only do it because I think there's an opportunity to actually try to be one of the best investors in the world. And it's these different trend lines that I observe coming together. It's still a long shot to be able to pull that off, but I don't think it's impossible.
You said previously that you've built your career as a venture backpack, messy, non-linear, always accumulating, obviously a lot of intellectual curiosity and sheer desire to learn things that are different. Also, like all great founders, a desire to compete and be the best at something. Where do you think those two things come from?
I have a desire to learn things and be the best at them when I think I can be the best at them. I don't get invited to play paddle anymore because I'm terrible at ball sports. And people will be like, Finn, why don't you practice? You could be good at ball sports. And I'm like, I'm not going to be the best at ball sports. So I just don't do that because that would be a waste of my time. And I think that was something I took from my mom growing up. I studied mechanical engineering. In Ireland, you have to choose your subject area before you go into college. And when I was trying to decide what to do, I was like, if I do law, I can be a lawyer, but I probably can't be an astronaut. If I do engineering and maths, I can probably still be a lawyer, but I can also be an astronaut. I want to keep the doors open to myself. And I think when I was growing up, I was like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a director, I want to be all these different things. And I gradually started figuring out the things that I thought I could be great at. One of those things that I think we were very fortunate in our house was like my mom bought Macintosh when I was super young. My dad had been an Air Force pilot, so I always had this interest in aviation, aerospace. I had all of these different influences in my life and people around me that encouraged me. I think when I was 8, I had this old derelict site near where we would practice sailing. I had read some article about camel racing in the Middle East and how people in the Middle East had a lot of money. I pitched this group of guys in the bar on how we should open a camel racing track on the site. There was a guy called John Roberts who was a very successful kind of like small bit like construction business guy. And John was just like, Finn, you don't let them stop you. You build that camel racing track. People always underestimate how much little nudges when you're growing up encourage you to pursue things. And it's like, there are objectively stupid ideas, but there's no idea so stupid that you shouldn't pursue it to the point of realizing that you don't want to do it. And I think that kind of curiosity leads me to spend time on things that might seem like a waste of time or far-fetched for other people. Honestly, I think if anything like this feels like work, you're not going to be able to actually be the best.
You have to get there quite early, though. You say 18 months before it's obvious, before the vertical heats up. How do you come up with these ideas? Where do they come from? Is it just science fiction inspired or informed by conversation with smart people? What's the formula for being ahead of the curve?
I think it's trying to figure out what smart people are spending their time on, and like also where smart people are spending their time that's not in the limelight and not high status. There's this Matt Kohler saying it's like the job of a venture capitalist is not to predict the future, it's to see the present very clearly. I often think podcast advice is like total trash because that advice is for Matt Kohler at Benchmark. If you are Matt Kohler and you are at Benchmark, your job is to see the present very clearly because you do the hottest Series A on the planet and beat everyone else. If you're Finn Murphy at Nebular, that is a really bad strategy. Where I try to sit in terms of generating these different ideas is I don't think I'm smarter than anyone. I say this to founders, if someone knows more than you do about your business, your product, or your customers, that is a massive problem. You don't want that investor because they're going to have ideas about how you should run your business, even if they're super involved. The max amount of time any investor should, like even this is very credible, like say they're giving you a day a week, so 20% of their time, they're still only in your business 1 day a week. They're missing 80% of the context on what's going on. And so for me, it's coming to these areas with like, I hate to use the word humble, but actually just being like, I don't know that much, but I am here to learn. And I've seen a bunch of dynamics in different technology trends in different company, like how sort of markets end up forming. And then just going to founders and learning and figuring out where your smart friends going, where are people spending time. I went to a meetup of the Quantum Harvard Club that was 5 undergrads, 3 of them were there to get free pizza. But the 2 that I met were actually really interesting and have kept me in the loop on other stuff. But it was the same thing, like going to meet that, I was like, okay, there's only 2 people at Harvard undergrad actually interested in quantum right now. This is probably like too far ahead of the curve. I sort of find like my best idea generation is you meet these people and you ask them what they're interested in and where they're going, where their friends are spending time. And I talk to a lot of investors, I talk to a lot of vendors, I talk to a lot of people in university, and I try to put together the different dots. I think the job is like more holistic than people give it credit for. Like the whole thing of like, ignore the macro, ignore the markets, like venture is an illiquid 10, 15-year time horizon thing. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, obviously you have to be aware of these systems. One of my theses around healthcare IT came from was like, I think demographic change is like an unstoppable force that is going to change a whole bunch of different areas of the economy and society writ large. What are the areas where that's going to impact you? One that I looked into was manufacturing. A lot of skilled machinists are retiring and leaving the workforce, and there's very few people coming in who've been trained sufficiently to be able to backfill those roles. You have geopolitical instability moving from like unipolar world to bipolar world, multipolar world. And those things are like, okay, that's going to create tailwinds for manufacturing businesses. I went out and tried to find a bunch of manufacturing founders, and so far I've found 2 teams that I think are really amazing and are going to be able to ride those macro tailwinds. On the other side, I was looking at health, and it's like, okay, macro tailwinds around health, around demographic change. You've got like increasingly infirm aging population on one side, so you have a demand side issue. On the supply side, you have tightening political environments around immigration. Even countries like Germany that are trying to accelerate bringing more medical staff from around the world, they have a problem with their national policy. In the US, you have similar issues around national policy. And more people leaving the workforce, more people retiring. There's this really good line about Gary Cohn, Trump's old economic advisor. He was trying to explain to him at one point about why people didn't want to work in blast furnaces. If someone can work in an air-conditioned office sending emails for the same wage that they can work in front of a 400-degree furnace on their feet 10 hours a day, they'll take the email job. Even in the medical profession, as it's become more litigious, lower status in terms of respect within society, you're going to see fewer and fewer people wanting to do that. And what does that mean? In manufacturing, it's kind of people will pay more for stuff. People might buy less cars. In healthcare, it's well, your parents are going to get shit healthcare. And I think that that's something that's not tenable. So that was an area that I went in and found founders, and I ended up making 7 investments in that healthcare trend over the last 2.5 years. Now that category is so busy and a lot of people are chasing it down. For me, I'm almost at the point that unless there's some kind of proprietary relationship or I see something that's truly exceptional, that's not an area where I'm going to continue to spend more of my time.
So talent density in relation to a realistic opportunity set. That's sort of if I had to boil it down, which is interesting. The quantum piece is there's only 2 guys here. There's not enough talent density, even though I can see the opportunity. Healthcare on the other end, massive opportunity. So basically go fish where there's fish in the sea.
I had this funny conversation with an LP where he was I love all the stuff you've been doing. Why did you not tell me you were going to do stuff like this? I'm I told you I didn't know what I was going to do. If I tell you a bunch of things that I'm going to invest in, then I'm kind of hindered against making the best investment decisions because I've told you that I'm going to go do all these things. And then irregardless of the quality of founders I go find, I'm screwed. It's why specialist funds are exceptional to be in when you get the timing right. If you're in Ribbit during the fintech boom, rock and roll. But now Ribbit have totally repositioned themselves because it turns out fintech is not where you want to be right now. And I think healthcare specialist funds are probably going to have a moment right now. But it all depends on the type of person you are, the type of network you are, the type of strengths you have. And if you're in that one fund, it doesn't really matter because performance is so good. For me, that's not the type of investor I know I can be great at. I take a longer term view, and if I'm going to do this for 20 years, I'm going to have to build this muscle around developing these theses and moving into these areas.
It also took 4 generations to get to where we are. And it's not just Valentine staying focused and always trying to push to that point, but it's passing that on and making sure that whoever takes it on it's hard to say to somebody, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Keep doing what you're doing for 3 generations down the line. You'll be in a place where you can do the generalist thesis and see the best deal flow. It's not something you can influence. You can put it on the right track, but the train is going to go where it goes and you'll be long dead before you get to see that moment of success. What's the math behind your fund model and why do you think this is the right kind of shape and size for what you're trying to do?
I thought I would get 7-8% average. I think that's a little bit ambitious. I think I'll end up closer to 6.5. The average check size I thought would be 500K to 1.5. This is another thing you don't think about when you're raising the funds, the investable capital versus the actual fund size. Might put a meaningful dent in the amount of dollars you can actually get out the door. The biggest position I have in the fund is close to $2 million. The biggest initial check I've done is 1.25. But the smallest core check I've done is 400K. I think my whole fund model came off the basis of every venture fund right now, almost all sizes outside the real purists, is underwriting they need at least one $10 billion outcome for the fund math to make sense. What I wanted to do with my fund model was say you get 7% ownership, averaged out across the portfolio, make about 20 investments, concentrate capital into one or say 2 of them work, and we concentrated capital into one of those 2, then for that fund, you're probably getting cut down to 7 to probably call it 50% dilution in the one you followed on in. I'll own 3.5% in a good case of one of the companies in this portfolio that works. So this company is $1 billion company. this will be an okay fund. If I can't pick $1 billion company out of 20 investments, I just shouldn't be a venture capitalist. It's a total waste of time. And that's my base case for how good I have to be for this to be an okay fund. If that company is a $2 billion company, this is a good fund. If it's a $3 billion company, it's a great fund. And if it's a $10 billion company, it's the best fund in the entire vintage. And that's what I mean by trying to play the game in a way that exposes yourself to more risk.
You write really good musings, I have to say. One of your posts, LP want to buy a story, I think. What was the story that you were selling when you were raising for this first fund?
It was harder because I explored these themes that I'd spent time in. I would try to explain, this is how my brain works, this is how I pursue opportunities, this is where deal flow comes from. But if I was on the LP side, you hear a lot of the same shit, and everyone kind of says the same thing. It's here is my operator network, they send me deals. Here is my investor and angel network, they send me deals. Here is my venture partner viewpoint, they send me deals. Here is my discernible edge in XYZ thing. Here is my slide in my deck with my founder quote references that I have clearly written. I think the challenge of raising money for a venture fund, something that became an asset for me over time, was acknowledging that this is incredibly messy. The reason why this asset class is interesting, particularly at the early stage, is because you can't solve it. There's not a business model that consistently produces great returns. There's no oracle of data that you can go and just aggregate all of the data and be this is the company to invest in. So I think standing over that over time and being look, this is what I'm going to do. And that was why doing the first close early in my fundraise was important, because it was hey, here's what I said I'm going to do. I'm out there doing it. I made a co-investment with Sequoia, and the first couple of investments out of the fund, people were whoa, how did you get into that deal? The problem with venture is there's so much revisionist history around well, of course this is repeatable. Obviously, they're why would it not be repeatable? That friend may never send me another deal ever again. But I still talk to them because they're a friend and they're trusting and they have good opinions. It's trying to be can you help me demystify something that is inherently mysterious? The reason why it's interesting is because it's mysterious and there's so much variance. My view at the end was, if you want that variance, I'm the product for you. I'm going to do things that are going to allow me to maybe not reduce the variance, but increase the opportunity for more upside. And that is what I will optimize for. I will not optimize for taking your variance out of the outcome. If you want a 2.2x, go somewhere else. What I will do is take a setup where I can do bigger swings rather than returning a 5x on $30 million that I could return a 6x on $50 million or a 4x on $100 million.
Who were the first people that kind of got it? And were they helpful and instrumental in getting more folks on board? Just because sometimes we find that in Fund 1, you have a friends and family cohort, which the reasons why they sign up is very different from the reason why the second and the third close sign up to the fund.
The first people that got it were all people that had met me or interacted with me in some way, shape, or form over the previous 4 years in venture. I think from there on, it was proving myself to others. I met people in October, November 2022, and then met them again in August 23. And they were oh, things are going well. I have this vaguely nihilist view on raising as a venture fund manager, which nobody invests in an early stage venture fund. The primary reason for investing in an early stage venture fund is never, I think I'm going to make a lot of money. It's just not the reason why anyone does it. I was offering concentrated, correlated seed risk. A lot of my LPs are people with a lot of venture exposure. What problem do myself view in the long term? In 12 years' time, I'm going to give you 5 to 10 times your money back. And that's great, but that's in 12 years' time. It's kind of hard to make the actual motivating decision in the moment based on that alone, where the strategy resonated with people was I feel a lot of my venture managers are not taking enough risk. I do feel that a lot of them are in the same deals or categories. There is a lot of overlap in terms of entry price due to market timing. If they're all right, great. If they're all wrong, fucked. So this is the thing for me about this idea around variance.
You wrote another essay titled On Venture, where you say that the best founders are often impossible to underwrite on paper. So what's the weirdest yes you ever said to a check that was impossible to underwrite, and probably, I guess, the one that your LPs are most proud of you for writing, hopefully, because it really edges them towards that mediocre gray zone of B2B SaaS deals?
Yeah, I think me putting down the quantum computing incubation meets Bitcoin, the working title for that at one point was Quantum Heist. I have this kind of joke investment thesis that I call a sprinkling of crime. A lot of the best businesses operate in gray zones because it's very hard for incumbents to operate. Usually those gray zones end up having a ton of high upside opportunities that are relatively easy to capture. Call it Uber, Airbnb, all the fintechs like Stripe, Coinbase, Revolut. And like that sort of viewpoint was, obviously if you start with a sprinkling of crime, it's not the best way of starting out an investment memo that goes in front of a serious person. So I'm like, it's a bit, but it's a kind of serious bit.
I call them acts of elegant piracy. Right?
Oh, yeah. Elegant piracy is a good one. I think that on the quantum side of things, I made a very weird bet that I was like, I think a quantum computer is going to be capable of proving that Bitcoin, like the security that secures Bitcoin's UTXOs, so not the hash rates, but the actual wallets themselves or addresses, that is going to be vulnerable in an impractical academic setting in the next 5 years. And then you're like, wait, what do you mean impractical academic setting? And then that's going to cause issues with social consensus around safety, security, and value. And then it's like, okay, well, that's true. And now what are you doing? Now we're building a crypto fail-safe off-ramp product to facilitate Bitcoin security. And so we're going to put together a team of cryptographers. They were like, what do you know about cryptography? And I'm like, I've read some books. And it's like, what do you know about quantum computing? I'm like, I've thought about it a bunch. Why would you ever do this? We put together a team of some of the best cryptographers, one of the best leaders coming from the crypto space. We're raising at the moment one of the best crypto seed funds, the best quantum funds, and one of the best Bitcoin funds. People will be like, how? I now am also, this is revisionist history, because had this not worked, I would look like a total mug. And I would be okay with that. It would be like, Finn, that was a dumb thing to pursue. I pitched my LPs on this in November last year, and then 2 weeks later, Google had their Willow announcement, and now everyone is like, whoa, quantum's a thing. Finn, how did you know? This is fortunate. I did know something, but the timing of how all this is played out makes me look more clairvoyant than I actually am. I think that's what I mean. I find writing investment memos or marketing documents more often than not, because you have teams of people who don't have all the context on the business, don't have all the context on the market, and making an investment is a one-way door decision. And so you want everyone to feel fully informed and aware of what they're doing. But sometimes the nuance and context and reasons why to do one of these things, it's just really hard.
What's your pitch to these founders / early team that you bring together? Obviously, game recognizes game. So a founder sees another founder and is like, oh, I'd love to riff with Finn. But what do you promise them besides the capital?
I'm super straightforward to deal with. I don't fuck people around. Honestly, I literally tell people, I'm just me. I'm not going to be able to introduce you to all your customers. I'm not going to introduce you to your first 5 engineering hires. I set expectations of you can call me every day if you want, or you can never speak to me again. Both are fine. I'm not here to be someone who wants to be involved in running your business for you. I'm here to be a thought partner. I'm here to support you when it's good times. I'm here to support you when it's bad times. And if you're running out of money, I'm not going to be the person being oh, what the fuck? Why aren't you making money for me? I'm going to be this is your life. This is your business. I'm diversified. The only thing I ask is that you don't have a miserable time doing something that you don't think is going to work. Work on the thing that you're passionate about that gets you up and excited. If anything is going to work, it's going to be that. Don't work on something because you believe you own me or some other investor or something. That place of motivation is never going to be the thing that turns what you're doing into building something truly great. Some founders are that doesn't resonate because they're like, I actually want like Sequoia, or I want Andreessen's brand, or I want this, and I'm like, rock and roll, like do your thing. But I tell people, if you believe that's going to be meaningful to your business, then you should absolutely take their money. You're the CEO, you need to start making decisions. Sometimes you'll realize that actually the brand is not that helpful. Or it's like, oh, actually, I'm a seed investment out of a $20 billion vehicle. Or it's like, oh, I don't agree with the politics of the firm that have taken my money, and why are they being so loud and active about this now? But I think that the positioning I have to have is more of a, I'm here to be your partner, I'm here to be really reasonable. And that plays out in, like, I lost a deal in December that 5 days later the founders called me and were like, hey, the person we chose has kind of been a pain in the ass about major investor rights. They were like, how do you feel about that? And I'm like, I just want pro rata information rights in the next round. Otherwise, not chill. And they were like, will you work with us still? I'm like, yeah, totally. I think it's very important that you're going to win stuff, you're going to lose stuff, but the reputation you have with founders is the thing that actually carries over regardless. And in both scenarios, it's going to be the thing that will actually show you the next great deal. That to me is really where you have to be able to win when things are competitive.
How do you keep all your ducks in a row between the LP side, the explorations, the incubations, the portfolio management, capital calls? It's just you, right?
I actually this morning hired a full-time CFO and operating partner to help me scale. I started this journey when I was 29. I'm 32 now. I don't have kids. This is the period in my life where I have the most available time to run as hard as I possibly can at a problem. The thing that I'm running hard at is building this firm and breaking out. I say this to founders and I try to take my own advice. We are in a momentum business. People hear about you. You get a win. You turn that into the next fund. You turn that into the next great hire. You turn that into the great next investment. Like, it doesn't